The dead blossom's still there. Oswald was looking out the passenger window at the gray, furry corpse on the side of the road. Somehow it looked even deader than it had yesterday. Last night rain hadn't helped. Nothing looks deader than a dead possum, Oswald's dad said. Except this town, Oswald mumbled, looking at the boarded-up storefronts and the display windows, which were displayed nothing but dust. What's that? Dad said. He was already wearing the stupid red vest they put him on when he works on the deli counter on the snack space. Oswald wished he waited to put it on until after he dropped him at school. This town, Oswald said, louder this time. This town looks deader than a dead possum. His dad laughed. Well, I don't guess I can argue with that. 3 years ago, when Oswald was 7, there had actually been stuff to do there. A movie theater, a game and card store, and the ice cream of shop with amazing waffle cones. But then, the mill had closed. The mill had basically been the reason the town existed. Oswald's dad had lost his job, and so had hundreds of other kids' moms and dads. Lots of families had moved away, including Oswald's best friend Ben and his family. Oswald's family had stayed because his mom's job at the hospital was steady, and they didn't want to move far away from Grandma. So Dad ended up in a part-time job at the snack space, which paid $5 an hour less than he made at the mill, and Oswald watched the town die. One business after another shut down, like the organs in a dying body, because nobody had the money for movies or games or amazing waffle cones anymore. Are you excited it's the last day of school? Dad asked. It was one of those questions adults always ask, like, how was your day, and did you brush your teeth? Oswald shrugged. I guess, but there's nothing to do with Ben gone. School's boring, but home's boring too. When I was 10, I wasn't home in the summer until I got called in for supper, Dad said. I rode my bike and played baseball and got into all kinds of trouble. Are you saying I should get in trouble? Oswald said. No, I'm saying you should have fun. Dad pulled into the drop-off line in front of the Westbrook Elementary. Have fun. He made it sound so easy. Oswald walked through the school double doors and ran smack into Dylan Copper, the last person he wanted to see. Oswald was apparently the first person Dylan wanted to see, though because of his mouth spread with a wide grin, Dylan was the tallest kid in 5th grade, and clearly enjoyed looming over his victims. Well, if it isn't Oswald the Ocelot, he said, his grin spreading impossibly wider. That one gets old, doesn't it? That one never gets old, does it? Oswald walked past Dylan and was relieved when his tormentor chose not to follow him. When Oswald and his 5th grade classmates were preschoolers, there was a cartoon of one of the little kids' channels about the big pink ocelot named Oswald. As a result, Dylan and his friends start calling him Oswald the Ocelot on the first day of kindergarten, and had never stopped. Dylan was the kind of kid who picked on anything that made you different. If it hadn't been Oswald's name, it would have been his freckles or cowlick. The name-calling had gotten much worse this year in U.S. history when they learned of the man who shot John F. Kennedy was named Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald would rather be an ocelot than an assassin. Since it was the last day of school, there was no attempt of doing any kind of real work. Miss McCham had announced the day before the students were allowed to bring their electronics as long as they took responsibility for anything getting lost or broken. The announcement made no effort would be made towards any education activities of any kind. Oswald didn't have any modern electronics. True, there was one laptop at home, but the whole family shared it, and he wasn't allowed to bring it at school. He had a phone, but it was the saddest, most out-of-dated model imaginable. But he didn't want to take it out of his pocket because he knew any kid who saw it would make fun of how pathetic it was. So while the other kids played games on their tablets or handheld consoles, Oswald sat. After just sitting became intolerable, he took out a notebook and pencil and started to draw. He wasn't the best artist in the world, but he could draw well enough that his images looked identifiable. And there was a certain cartooning quality about his drawings that he liked. The best thing about drawing, though, was that he could get lost in it. It was like he fell into the paper and become part of the scene he was creating. It was a welcome escape. He didn't know why, but lately he'd been drawing mechanical animals. Bears, bunnies, and birds. He imagined them being human-sized and moving with the jerkiness of robots in the old science fiction movies. They were furry on the outside, but the fur covered a hard metal skeleton, filled with gears and circuits. Sometimes he'll draw the animals' exposed metal skeletons and sketch them, with the fur peeled back to show some of the mechanical workings underneath. It was a creepy effect, like seeing a person's skull peeking out from beneath the skin. Oswald was so immersed in his drawings that he was startled when Miss McChing turned off the lights to show a movie. Movies always seems like the teacher's final act of desperation of the day up before break, a way to keep the kids quiet and relatives still for an hour and a half before sending them off loose for the summer. The movie Miss McCham chose was, in Oswald's opinion, too babyish for the room full of fifth graders. It was about a farm with talking animals that he had watched it before, but he watched it again because really, what else did he have to do? At recess, kids stood around tossing a ball back and forth and talking about what they're going to do over the summer. I'm going to football camp. I'm going to basketball camp. I'm going to hang out with my neighborhood pool. I'm going to stay with my grandparents in Florida. Oswald sat on the bench and listened. For him, there would be no camps and no pool memberships and no trips because there was no money. So he'd draw pictures, play his old video games that he already beaten 1,000 times, and maybe go to the library. If Ben was still here, it would have been different. Even if they were just doing the same old stuff, they'll be doing it together, and could always make Oswald laugh, riffing on video game characters or doing a perfect impersonation of one of their teachers. He and Ben had fun no matter what they did. But now a summer without Ben yawned before him, wide and empty. Most days, Oswald's moms worked from 12 p.m. until 12 a.m., so his dad had to make dinner. Usually they got by on frozen meals like lasagna and chicken pot pie, or on cold cuts on potato salads from the snack space deli that were still good enough to eat but not good enough to sell. When Dad did cook, it was usually things that require boiling water. While Dad got their dinner ready, Oswald's job was to feed Jinx, their very spoiled black cat. Oswald often thought that he used about the same amount of cooking skills in opening Jinx's can of stinky cat food than his dad used in his dinner preparations. Tonight, Oswald and Dad was setting down the plates of blue box macs and cheese and some canned corn his dad had zapped in the microwave. It was a very yellow meal. You know, I was thinking, Dad said, squirting ketchup onto his macaroni and cheese. Why did he do that? Oswald wondered. I know you're old enough to stay home by yourself, son. But I don't like the idea of you staying by yourself the whole day while your mom and I are at work. I was thinking you could ride into town with me in the mornings and I could drop you off at the library. You could read, surf the net. Oswald couldn't let this one slide. How out of date could his dad be? Nobody says surf the net anymore, Dad. They do now, because I just said it. Dad forked up some macaroni. Anyway, I thought you could hang out in the library in the mornings. When you get hungry, you could head over to Jeff's Pizza for a slice and a soda, and I could pick you up from there once my shift over at 3. Oswald considered a moment. Jeff's Pizza was kind of weird. It wasn't dirty exactly, but it was run down. The Vinley and the booth seats had been repaired with duct tape, and the plastic leathers had fallen off the menu board above the counter, so the listing toppings including pepperoni and hamburger. It was clear that Jeff's Pizza used to be something bigger and better than now it was. There were tons of unused floor space and lots of unused electrical outlets along the base of the walls. Also, on the far wall was a small stage. Even though there was no performance there, not even as much as a karaoke night. It was a strange place, sad and not what it had once been, like the rest of the town. That being said, the pizza was decent, and more important, it was the only pizza in town if you didn't count the kind of the frozen food department in the snack space. The few good restaurants in town, including Gino's Pizza and Marco's Pizza, which, unlike Jeff's, had real pizza maker names, had closed their doors not long after the mill had. So you'll give me the money for pizza? Oswald asked. Since Dad's job's loss, Oswald's allowance had dwindled to practically nothing. Dad smiled, a kind of sad smile. It seemed to Oswald, son, we're bad off, but we're not so bad off I can't spot you $3.50 for a slice and soda. Okay, Oswald said. It was hard to say no to a warm, gooey cheese slice. Since it wasn't school night and wouldn't be again for quite some time, Oswald stayed up after Dad went to bed and watched an old Japanese monster movie, which Jinx curled up purring on his lap. Oswald has seen a lot of B-grade Japanese horror films, but this one, Zenderex vs. Mechazerex, was new to him. As always, Zenderex just looked like a giant dragon thing, but Mechazerex reminded him of the mechanical animals he drew when he stripped them down on their fur. He laughed at the movie's special effects. The train Zenderex destroyed was clearly a toy, and how the actor's lips moving didn't match the dub in English. Somehow, though, he always found himself rooting for Zenderex. Even though he was just a guy in the rubber suit, somehow he managed to have a lot of personality. In bed, he tried to count his blessings. He didn't have Ben, but he had monster movies in the library and lunchtime pizza slices. It was better than nothing. But it still wasn't going to be enough to keep him going all summer. Please, he wishes. His eyes closed tight. Please let something interesting happen. Alpha woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. The coffee he could do without, but the bacon smelled amazing. Breakfast meant time with his mom, often the only time he got with her until the weekend. After one necessary stop, he hurried down the hall to the kitchen. Well, look at that. My rising sixth grader has risen. Mom was standing over the stove with her furry pink bathrobe, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail flipping. "Oh, yum. Were those pancakes?" "Hi, Mom." She opened her arms. "I demand a morning hug." Oswald sighed like it annoyed him, but he went over and hugged her. It was funny. With Dad, he always said he was too old for hugs, but he never turned him down his mother's open arm. Maybe it was because he didn't get to spend much time with her during the week. While he and Dad spent so much together, they sometimes get on each other's nerves. He knew Mom misses him, and felt bad for having to work such long hours, but he also knows that since Dad's job as a snack space was just a part-time, Mom's long hours were the most of the reasons the bills were getting paid. Mom always says that adult life was a fight between time and money. The more money you earn, spend on bills and necessities, the less time you got to spend with your family. It was a difficult balance. Oswald sat down at the kitchen table and thanked his mom when she poured his orange juice. "First day of summer break, huh?" Mom went back to the stove to scoop up the pancakes with her spatula. "Uh-huh." He probably should have tried to sound more enthusiastic, but he couldn't muster the energy. She slid the pancake onto his plate and then served him 2 strips of bacon. "Not the same without Ben, huh?" He shook his head. He wasn't going to cry. Mom ruffled his hair. "I know it's a bummer, but hey, maybe a new friend will move to town." Oswald looked at her hopeful face. Why would anyone move back here? "Okay, I see your point," Mom said, piling up another pancake, "but you'll never know. Or maybe someone cool already lives here. Someone you don't even know yet." "Maybe. I doubt it," Oswald said. "These pancakes are great, though." Mom smiled and ruffled his hair again. "Well, I got to get going for me. Do you want more bacon? If you do, you better grab it before your dad gets in here and vacuum it all." Sure. It was Oswald's personal policy never to refuse more bacon. The library was actually kind of fun. He found the latest book in the science fiction series he liked and a manga that looks interesting. As always, he had to wait forever to use the computers because they were always taken by people who looked like they had no place else to be. Men with straggly beards, wearing layers of rattle clothing, too thin. Woman with sad eyes and bad teeth. He waited his turn politely, knowing that some of these people used the library for shelter during the day, then spend the night on the streets. Jeff's Pizza was as weird as he remembered. The big empty space beyond the booths and tables was like a dance floor where nobody danced. The walls were painted in pale yellow, but they must have had used cheap paint or only one coat, because shapes of whatever had been in the walls before were still visible. It had probably been some kind of mural with people or animal, but now it was just shadows behind a thin veil of yellow paint. Oswald sometimes tried to figure out what the shapes were, but they were too bobbly to make out. Then there was a stage that never got used, standing empty but seemingly waiting for something. Though a feature even weirder in the stage laid in the back right corner. It was a large rectangular pen surrounded by yellow netting, and it had been topped off with a sign that says, "Do not use." The pen itself was filled with red, blue, and green plastic balls that had probably been brightly colored once, but were now fading and fuzzy with dust. Oswald knew the ball pits had been properly featured in kiddie playlands, but had largely disappeared because of concerns of hygiene. After all, who was going to disinfect all those balls? Oswald had no doubt that if the ball pit was still been popular when he was little, his mom wouldn't have let him play in one. As a licensed practical nurse, she was always happy to point out places she found to be too germy to play in, and when Oswald would complain that she would never let him have fun, she said, "You know what's not fun? Pink eye." Except for the empty stage in the pulpit, the strangest feature in Jeff's Pizza was Jeff himself. He seemed to be the only person who worked there, so he both took orders in the counter and made the pizza. But the place was never crowded enough for this to be a problem. Today, like any other days, Jeff looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His dark hair was sticking out in weird places, and he had alarming bags under his bloodshot eyes, his apron stained with both recent and ancient tomato sauce. "What can I get ya?" he said to Oswald, sounding bored. "A cheese slice and an orange soda, please," Oswald said. Jeff stared off in the distance, as though he had to think about whether the request is a reasonable one or not. Finally, he answered, "Okay, $3.50. One thing you could say about Jeff's pizza slices? They were huge. Jeff served them on flimsy white paper plates that were soon stained with grease, and the corners of the triangle always overlapped the plate's rims. Oswald set it into the booth with his slice and soda. The first bite, the tip of the triangle, was always the best. Somehow, the proportions of all the flavor in the bite were perfect. He savored the warm, melty cheese and the tainty sauce, and the pleasantly greased crust. As he ate, he looked over to a few other customers, a pair of mechanics from an oil change place that folded up their pepperoni slices and were eating them like sandwiches. A table full of office workers clumsily attacking their slices with flimsy forks and knives, so they wouldn't drop sauce on their ties and bows, Oswald guessed. After Oswald finished his slice, he wished for one more, but he knew he didn't have the money for it, so he wiped off his greasy fingers and took out his library book. He sipped his soda and read, falling into a world where kids with secret powers went to a special school to learn how to fight evil. Kid. A man's voice startled Oswald out of the story. He looked up to see Jeff in his sauce-stained apron. Oswald figured he had outstayed his welcome. He had sat in the booth reading for 2 hours after having bought a meal that cost less than $4. Yes, sir, Oswald said, because politeness never hurt. I got a couple more cheese slices that didn't sell at lunch. You want them? Oh, Oswald said. No thanks, I don't have any more money. He wished he did, though. On the house, Jeff said. I'll just throw them away anyways. Oh, okay, sure, thanks. Jeff picked up Oswald's empty cup. I'll get you some more orange soda while I'm at it. Thanks. It was funny. Jeff's expression never changed. He looked tired and miserable, even he was being extra nice. Jeff brought 2 slices stacked on the paper plate and a fresh cup of orange soda. Here you go, kid, he said, setting down the cup and plate. Thank you. Oswald wondered for a minute if Jeff felt sorry for him. If Jeff might think he was terribly poor like the homeless people who hanged out all day in a library, instead of just a regular, barely making ends meet poor that he was. But then Oswald figured if there was free pizza sitting in front of you, maybe it wasn't time to worry about the reasons for it. Maybe it was time for eat. Oswald had no problem polishing off the 2 huge slices. For the past month, his appetite had been unstable. When Mom cooked him piles of pancakes in the morning, he said that he must be having a growth spurt, causing him to eat like he had a howling leg. His phone vibrated in the pocket the second he sucked down the last of his soda. He looked at his dad's text. We'll be out front at Jeff's in 2 minutes. Perfect timing. It had been a good day. The days of the library and Jeff's people started to add up. The first couple of weeks had been great, but now the library didn't have the next book in the series he was reading. He had grown bored of his online fantasy games, which advertises free, now wouldn't let him advance any further while paying money. He had gotten tired of not having anyone his age to hang out with. He hadn't gotten tired of pizza yet, but he was starting to imagine he might be in the future. Tonight was family fun time, a one-night-a-week event that varied depending on Mom's work schedule. Back when the mill was still open, family fun night meant dinner at the restaurant, pizza or Chinese or Mexican. After their meal, they'll do some fun activities together. They'll go to the movies if something kid-friendly was playing, but if not, they'll be going to the bowling alley or the roller rink where Mom and Dad used to go on dates when they were in high school. Mom and Dad were great skaters, and Oswald was terrible. But they skated on either side with him, holding his hands and keeping him up. They usually top off their evening with a waffle cone at the ice cream place. Downtown, Oswald and Mom would make fun of Dad because no matter what ice cream flavor was available, he always gets vanilla. Since the mill closed down, though, family fun night had turned into an at-home affair. Mom would make something for dinner that was easy but festive, like tacos from a mix of or hot dogs. They sat and then played board games or watched a movie they rented from the Red Box. It was still fun, of course, but sometimes Oswald wished allowed for the old days of seeing new movies at the theaters and having waffle cones after. And Dad had to remind him that the important things was that they all got to spend the time together. Sometimes when the weather was nice, they'll have a family fun night. They'll pack a picnic of cold cuts and salad courtesy of the snack space, and hand over to the state park. They'll eat their dinner at the wooden table and watch the squirrels and birds and raccoons. Afterward, they'll go for a walk on one of the hiking trails. These outings are always a nice change, but Oswald was also aware of why these are the only family fun nights that ever got them out of the house. Picnics were free. Tonight, they were staying in. Mom had made spaghetti and garlic bread. They had played a game of Clue, which Mom won, as she usually did, and now they were piled up on the couch together under PJs with a huge bowl popcorn between them, watching a remake of an old science fiction movie. Once the movie was over, Dad said, "Well, that was pretty good, but not as good as the real version." "What do you mean, the real version?" Oswald said. "That was the real version." "Not really," Dad said. "I mean, it was set in the same universe as the real version, but it was kind of a cheap knockoff of the one that came out when I was a kid. Dad always had to be so optionate. He could never just watch something and enjoy it. So the movies are always the ones that you watch when you were a kid," Oswald said. "Not always, but in the case, yes." Dad was settling in. Oswald could tell for one of his favorite things, a good argument. "But the special effects in the original version stink," Oswald said. "All those puppets and rubber masks. I'll take a puppet over or model over CGI any day," Dad said, leaning back on the couch and propping his feet under the coffee table. "That stuff is so slick and fake. It got no warmth, no texture, and besides, you like those old Zendalic movies, and the special effects in those are terrible." "Yeah, but I just watched those to make fun of them," Oswald said. Even though he did really like Xanderix was pretty cool. Mom came in from the kitchen with a bowl of ice cream. Not as good as the waffle cone place, but nothing to turn your nose up either. "Okay, if you guys don't cut out with the nerd argument, I'm going to pick the next movie we watch. And it's going to be a romantic comedy." Oswald and his dad shut up immediately. That's about what I thought," Mom said, passing around the bowls of ice cream. As Oswald was laying in his bed sketching his mechanical animals, his phone vibrated at the nightstand. There was only one person other than his parents who could ever text him. Hey, Ben had typed on the screen. Hey back, Oswald typed. How's your summer? Awesome. At Mertley Bridge for vacation. It's so cool. Arcades and mini golfs everywhere. Jealous. Oswald typed, and he meant it. A beach with arcades and mini golf really did sound awesome. Wish you were here, Ben typed. Me too. How's your summer? Okay, Oswald texted. He was briefly tempted to make his summer sound cooler than it was, but he couldn't never lie to Ben. Been going to the library a lot. Lunch at Jeff's Pizza. That's all? It did sound pathetic compared with the family trip to the beach, he texted. Pretty much, yeah. I'm sorry, Ben texted. And then, the pizza place is creepy. They chatted a little while longer, and although Oswald was happy to hear from Ben, he was also sad that his friend was so far away and having such a good time without him. Monday morning, and Oswald was in a bad mood. Even his mom's pancakes didn't help. In the car, Dad turned up the radio too loud. It was some stupid song about a tractor. Oswald reached for the knob and turned it down. Hey, dude, Picker picks the music. You know that, Dad said. He turned up the awful song back up even louder. It's bad music, Oswald said. I'm trying to save you from yourself. Well, I don't like those video game songs you listen to, Dad said. But I don't just barge in your room and turn them down. And turn them off. Yeah, Oswald said, but I don't force you to listen to them either. Dad turned the radio down. What's up? What's with the attitude, son? Whatever's bothering you is not just that I like country music. Oswald didn't feel like talking, but clearly he was being forced to. And once he opened his mouth, he was surprised to feel complaints erupting from him like lava from a volcano. I'm tired of every day being exactly the same. Ben texted me yesterday. He was at Metro Beach having an awesome time. He wanted to know what I was doing, and I told him I was going to the library and Jeff's Pizza every day. And you know what he texted back? I'm sorry, and that pizza place is creepy. Dad sighed. I'm sorry we can't go on vacation and have an awesome time, Oz. Things are hard right now, where money is concerned. I'm sorry it affects you. You're a kid. You should have not worry about money. I'm hoping they'll move me to full-time at the store in the fall. That'll help a lot. And if I get promoted to deli manager, it'll be another $1.50 an hour. Oswald knew he shouldn't say what he was about to say. But here he went anyway. Ben's dad got a job that pays even better than his old job at the mill. Dad tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Yeah, well then, and Ben's dad had to move 500 miles away to get that job. His voice sounded tight, and as tight as his grip on the wheel, and Oswald couldn't tell his jaw was clenched. Your mom and I talked a lot about it, but we decided not to move, especially with your grandma living here, and needing help sometimes. This is our home, kiddo, and things aren't perfect, but we just have to make the best of them. Oswald felt himself crossing the line from grumbling into a grounding territory. But why did some people get the best of everything and others had to settle for free library visits and cheap pizza? And so every day you toss me out like on the streets like garbage. If this is the best of things, I hate to see the worst. Now, son, don't you think that is a little dramatic? Oswald didn't stick around to hear the rest of his dad's criticisms. He got out of the car and slammed the door. His dad speeded away, probably glad to get rid of him. Just as predicted, the library still didn't have the book he wanted. He flipped through the few magazines, the kind with exotic jungle animals, which he usually liked, but they weren't doing much for him today. When his turn came for the computer, he put on his earbuds and watched some YouTube videos. But he wasn't in a good mood. He wasn't in a good enough mood to laugh. At lunchtime, he sat at Jeff's Pizza with a slice and soda, every day a cheese slice. If his dad wasn't so stingy, he'll get him another $1 so he would have pepperoni or sausage. But no, it had to be the cheapest pizza you could get. Sure, money was tight, but really, was another $1 a day going to break the bank? Looking around the place, Oswald decided Ben was right. Jeff's Pizza was creepy. There was those shadowy painted-over figures on the wall, the dusty abandoned ball pit, and when he thought about it, Jeff was kind of creepy too. He looked 100 years old, but was probably just 30. With those heavy-lidded, bloodshot eyes, the stained apron, and the slow speech and movement, he was like a zombie pizza chef. Oswald thought about his argument with Dad that morning. Soon Dad would be texting him, expecting him to come outside the door. Well, today was going to be different. Today, Dad would have to come and find him. There was one perfect place to hide. Oswald was going into the pit. The pit was pretty gross, really. Obviously untouched for years. The plastic spheres were covered in a gray, fuzzy dust, but hiding would be the great prank for his dad. His dad, who would always dropping him off and pick him up like somebody's dry cleaning, would actually get out of the car and make an effort for a change. Oswald wouldn't make it easy for him either. Oswald took off his shoes. Yes, the ball pit was disgusting, but at least getting into it would make today different from all other days that have come before it. He climbed into the pit and felt the balls parting to make room for his body. He moved his arms and legs. It was a little like swimming. If you could swim in dry plastic spheres. He found his footing at the bottom of the pit. Some of the balls were strangely sticky, but he tried not to think about why. If he was going to trick his dad, he was going to have to go all the way under. He took a deep breath, and as if he were about to jump into the swimming pool, and fell into his knees. That put him up to his neck, wiggling around so he could sit on the pit balls. the pit floor, put his head under too. The balls spread apart far enough so he could breathe, but it was dark and it made him feel claustrophobic. The place stacked on dust and mute. Pink eye, he could hear his mother's voice saying, "You're going to get pink eye." The smell really was getting to him. The dust tickled his nose. He felt his knees coming on, but he couldn't move. His hand threw the spears fast enough to reach his nose and muffled it. He sneezed 3 times, each one louder than the one before. Oswald didn't know if his dad was looking for him yet, and if he was, the sneezing ball pit had probably given away his location. Besides, it was too dark and too gross in there. He had to come up for air. As he rose, his ears were assaulted by the sound of beeping electronics and yelling and laughing kids. It took a few seconds for his eyes to adjust from the darkness of the pit to the brightness that now surrounded him, the flashing lights and vivid colors. He looked around and muttered, "Toto, I don't think we're in Cadmus anymore." The walls were lined with shiny arcade cabinets, housing games. He heard his dad talk about his own childhood. Miss Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Frogger, Cubert, Gaha. A neon-like claw machine displayed plush blue, elf-like creatures and orange cartoon cars. He looked down the pit and realized he was surrounded by little kids, wallowing in the strangely clean and now brightened colored plastic orbs. He stood over the preschools like a giant. He stepped out of the ball pit to find his shoes, but they were gone. Standing on the colorful carpet in his sock feet, he looked around. There were a lot of kids his age and younger, but there was something different about them. Everyone's hair was styled and fluffy, and the boys wore polo shirts and color lots of guys wouldn't get caught dead in, like pink and aqua. The girls' hair were almost unbelievably big, with bangs that stood out of their foreheads like claws. They wore pastel-colored tops that matched their pastel-colored shoes. The colors, the lights, the sounds. It was a sensory overload. But what was that music? Oswald looked around to see where it was coming from. Across the room in the stall stage, a trio of animatronic animals blinked their big blank eyes, opened and closed their mouths, and pivoted back and forth in sync of the jangly, annoying song. There was a brown bear, a blue rabbit with a red bow tie, and some kind of a bird girl. They reminded Oswald of the mechanical animals he had caught himself drawing lately. The difference was that he could never decide if the animals in his drawings were cute or creepy. They were creepy. Strangely, though, the dozens or so little kids surrounding the stage didn't seem to think so. They were wearing birthday party hats with pictures of the characters on them, and dancing and laughing and having a great time. When the smell of pizza hit Oswald's nose, he understood. He was still in Jeff's Pizza, or more accurately, what Jeff Pizza had been before Jeff took over. The ball pit was new and not roped off. All the outlets on the wall had arcade games plugged into them. And he turned around to face the left wall, and the shapes of the shadows of the wall of Jeff's Pizza was a mural of the same characters' performance on the stage. The brown bear, the blue rabbit, and the bird girl. Below their faces were the words, "Freddy Fazbear's Pizza." Oswald's insides turned into ice water. How had this happened? He knew where he was, but he didn't know when it was or how he got there. Somebody bumped into him, and he jumped more than was normal. Since he felt a physical contact, this must not be a dream. He couldn't decide if the fact was good news or not. "Sorry, dude," the kid said. He was about Oswald's age, and he was wearing a light yellow polo with the collar turned up, tucked into what looks like a pair of dad jeans. The white tennis shoes he had on were huge, like clown shoes. He looked as if he would spend a long time fixing his hair. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, sure," Oswald said. He wasn't sure he was okay, actually, but he didn't know how to begin or explain his situation. "I've not seen you here before," the kid said. "Yeah," Oswald said, trying to figure out an explanation that wouldn't sound too weird. "I'm just visiting here. Staying with my grandma for a few weeks. This place is great, though. All these old games." "Old games?" the kid said, raising an eyebrow. "You're joking, right? I don't know about where you're from, but Freddy has the newest games around here. That's why the lines to play them are so long." "Oh yeah, I was just kidding," Oswald said, because he couldn't think of anything else to say. He had heard his dad talk about playing a lot of these games when he was a kid. Absurdly hard games, but he said, in which he was wasted many hours and many quarters. "I'm Chip," the kid said, running his fingers through his poofing hair. "Me and my buddy Mike," he nodded at the tall black kid wearing huge eyeglasses and a shirt with wide red and blue stripes. "We're about to play some skee-ball. Want to come with?" "Sure," Oswald said. It was nice to hang out with some other kids. Even if they seemed to be kids from another time, he didn't think it was a dream, but it sure was a weird one. Weird as one. "You got a name?" Mike said, looking at Oswald like he was some kind of strange specimen. "Oh, sure, I'm Oswald." He had been too weirded out to remember to introduce himself. Mike had given him a friendly slap in the back. "Well, I gotta warn you, Oswald, I'm the beast at skee-ball, but I'll go easy on you since you're new here. Thanks for having mercy on me," Oswald said. He followed him to the skee-ball area, and on the way, they passed someone in a rabbit suit and looked like a yellow version of the animatronic rabbit on the stage. Nobody else seemed to be paying attention to the rabbit guy, so Oswald didn't say anything. It was probably a Freddy Fazbear employee dressed up to entertain the little kids at the birthday party. Mike wasn't kidding about being a beast at skee-ball. He easily beat Chip and Oswald 3 times. But he was a good sport, and they spent the whole time joking around. It felt good being included. But after another couple of games, Oswald started to worry. What time was it really? How long has his dad been looking for him? And how was he going to get back to his real life? Sure, he wanted to give Dad a little scare, but he didn't want to scare the old man so much he got the police involved. Hey guys, I better run, Oswald said. My grandma, he almost said, just texted me, but realized Chip and Mike would have no idea what he was talking about. Whenever this was, there was no cell phones. My grandma's supposed to pick me up in a few minutes. Okay, dude, maybe we'll catch you up later, Chip said. And Mike gave a little nod and wave. Oswald left his companions, stood in the corner in his sock feet, and wondered what to do. He was having some kind of magical experience. He was late getting back, and he was missing his shoes. He was like some kind of mix-up Cinderella. How to get back? He could walk out of the front door of Fazbear Pizza, Freddy Fazbear's, but where would that take him? It might be the right place to find his dad's car waiting, but it wasn't the right time. Not the right decade, even. Then it dawned on him. Maybe the way out was the same way he got it in. At the ball pit. A mom was telling her 2 little kids it was time to leave. They tried to argue with her, but she turned on her stern mom voice and threatened them with an early bedtime. Once they get out, he got in. He sank beneath the surface before anyone could see that the kid over the height limit wasn't the ball pit. How long to stay under? Randomly, he decided to count to 100 and stand. He rose to his feet and found himself standing in the dusty, roped-off ball pit at Jeff's Pizza. He climbed out and found his shoes right where he left them, his phone vibrating in his pockets. It took out and read, "We'll be there in 2 minutes." Had no time passed at all? He headed out the door and Jeff said, "See ya, kid," behind him. "This looks great, Mom," Oswald said, spearing a sausage link with his fork. "You're in a good mood today." Mom slid a waffle onto his plate. "Quite a contrast from yesterday when you were Mr. Grumpy Pants." "Yeah," Oswald said. "They're supposed to get my book in the library today." The statement was true, but it wasn't the reason Oswald was in a good mood. Of course, it wasn't like he could tell her the real reason if he said, "I discovered a ball pit at Just Pizza that lets me travel in time." Mom would be dropping the waffles and picking up the phone to call a nearest child's psychologist. Oswald picked up his book at the library but was too impatient to read. He headed over to Jeff's Pizza as soon as it opened at 11. Jeff was in the kitchen when he got there, so he made a beeline for the pit. He sucked off his shoes, stepped in, and sank into the depths. Since it seems to work before, he counted to 100 before he stood. The animatronic band was playing some weird, jangling song that was partly drowned out the beating, bliming, and dinging at the variety of games. He wandered the floor and took in the video games. A whack-a-mole, a neon-like token sucker that lets you win some tickets. But probably not. If you push the button at the right time, older kids crowded around the video games. Preschoolers climb on the crayon-colored play equipment. Pink eye, Oswald thought. Though he had no room to talk, the way he was diving into the ball pit these days. Everything looked like it had before. He even caught sight of the calendar hanging in the open office that helped him pinpoint the date. 1985. Hey, it's Oswald. Chip was wearing a baby blue polo with his dad jeans and giant sneakers this time. Not a hair on his head was out of place. "Hey, Oz," Mike said. He was wearing a Back to the Future t-shirt. "Anyone ever call you that? Like Wizard of Oz?" "They do now," Oz said, grinning. He had gone from having the loneliest summer ever to having 2 new friends. And a nickname. True, all these seemed to be happening in the mid-1980s, but why get hung up on the details? "Hey," Chip said. "We just ordered a pizza. You want to come have some? We ordered a large, so there's more than we can eat." "Speak for yourself," Mike said, but he was grinning. "Okay," Chip said. "How about I say it's more than we should eat? Want to join us?" Oswald was curious about Freddy Fazbear's Pizza compared to Chef. "Sure, thanks." On the way on their table, they passed someone in the same yellow rabbit suit who was standing in the corner, still as a statue. Chip and Mike either didn't see him or ignore him, so Oswald tried to ignore him as well. Why hide in the corner like that, though? If he worked in the restaurant, surely he wasn't supposed to act all creepy. At the table, a young woman with a big blonde hair with blue eyeshadow served them a large pizza and a pitcher of soda. In the background, the animatronic band played on. The pizza was pepperoni and sausage with a crispy crust. A nice change from plain cheese slice. "You know," Mike said between bites, "when I was little, I loved Freddy Fazbear's Band. I even had a stuffed Freddy I used to sleep with. Now I look up at the stage with those things, give me the creeps. It's weird, huh? How stuff you like as a little kid gets creepy when you're older?" Chip helped himself with another slice. "Like clowns?" "Yeah, or dolls," Mike says between slices. "Sometimes I look at my sister's dolls all lined up on the shelf in her room. It's like they're staring at me. Or like that guy in the yellow rabbit costume," Oswald thought, but he didn't say anything. After they demolished the pizza, they played some skee-ball. Mike mopping the floor with them again, but really nice about it. Oswald didn't worry about this time anymore, because apparently time here didn't pass the same way as his own time zone. After skee-ball, they took turns playing air hockey in pair. Oswald was surprisingly decent at it, and he even managed to beat Mike once. When they started to run low on tokens, Oswald thanked them for sharing their wealth and said he hoped to see them again soon. After they said their goodbyes, Oswald waited until no one was looking and disappeared in the ball pit. Hanging out with Chip and Mike turned into a regular thing. Today, they weren't even playing video games. They were just sitting on the booth, drinking sodas and talking. trying to ignore the animatronic animals' annoying music as much as they could. You know what movie I like? Chip said. His polo shirt was peach color today. Oswald loved the guy, but really didn't he owe one shirt that wasn't the color of an Easter egg? The Eternal Song. Seriously? Mike said, pushing his huge glasses up on his nose. That movie was so boring. I was like, The Eternal Song is the perfect title for this movie because I don't think it's ever gonna end. They all laughed, and then Chip said, what did you think about it, Oz? I haven't seen that one, Oswald said. He said that a lot when hanging out with Chip and Mike. Oswald always listened to them talk about movies and shows they liked. When he mentioned one they didn't know, he looked up on it when he get home. He made a list of 80 movies he wanted to watch and checked on TV listening on the DVR to see if any of them might be showing. Also, particularly in Chip and Mike's controversial as much as he could. It was kind of like being a foreign exchange student. He sometimes had to fake his way through but by smiling and nodding and being generally agreeable. Man, you need to get out more, Mike said. Maybe you can go to the movies with Chip and me sometime. That'd be cool. Also said, because what else could he say? Actually, I'm from a distant future, and I don't think it's physically possible for me to see you any place but in Freddy Fazbear's in 1985. They both think it was a joke on Mike because his favorite movie was Back in the Future. Name one movie you have seen that you really like, Chip said to Oswald. I'm trying to figure out your taste is. Oswald's mind went blank. What was a movie from the 80s? E.T.? E.T.? Mike slapped the table laughing. E.T. was like 3 years ago. You really do need to get out more. Do they not have movie theaters when you come from? They do, Oswald thought. And they have Netflix and PlayStation and YouTube and social media. But he didn't say it. Of course, there was technology Chip and Mike talked about that he had only the vaguest knowledge of, like VCRs and boombox and cassette tapes. And he constantly had to remind himself not to talk about things like cell phones and tablets and the internet. He tried not to wear a t-shirt with characters of reference that might confuse them or other customers in 1985 Freddy Fazbears. Yeah, we definitely need to bring you up to date, Chip said. If only you knew, Oswald thought. Hey, do you want to play some games? Mike said. I feel like the skee ball calling me, but I promise I'll go easy on you guys. Chip laughed. No, you won't. You'll murder us. You guys go ahead, Oswald said. I think I'll just stay at the table. What, and watch the show? Mike said, nodding in the direction of the creepy characters on the stage. Is something wrong? If you suddenly decide to like Freddy Fazbear Prison, we need to get you help fast. No, nothing's wrong, Oswald said, but really something was. For the first few visits of 1985 Freddy Fazbear, it hadn't even occurred to him that he was basically mooching off Chip and Mike's generosity because he never had any money of his own. And even if he wasn't broke in the own time zone, with the money he brought from present day, even work in 1985, it was kind of pitiful, being broke in 2 decades. Finally he said, I just feel like I was always taking your money because I never had any. Hey dude, it's cool, Chip said. We haven't even noticed. Yeah, Mike said. We just figured your grandma never gave you any money. I know my grandma doesn't except when it's my birthday. They were being really nice, but Oswald still felt embarrassed. If he had talked about his lack of money, that meant they had noticed it. How about I just go hang out with you guys while you guys play, Oswald said. When he stood up, he felt a strange heaviness in his pocket. Something in them was so heavy he felt like his jeans might fall off. He reached in his pocket and pulled out double handfuls of 1985 Freddy Fazbear game tokens. He produced handful after handful and dumped them on the table. Or we could play using these, he said. He had no idea how to explain the magic that just occurred. I guess I forgot I was wearing these pants. The ones that had all the tokens in them. Chip and Mike looked a little confused, but then they grinned and started taking coins from the table on their own into their empty soda cups. Oswald did the same. He decided just to go with the weirdness. He didn't know how tokens got there, but then again, he didn't really know how he got there either. In the morning, as Dad was driving him to the library, Oswald asked, Dad, how old were you in 1985? I was just a couple years older than you, Dad said, and other than baseball, all I can think about was how many quarters I had to step at the arcade. Why do you ask? No reason in particular, Oswald said. I just been doing some research. Jeff's Pizza. Back before it was Jeff's Pizza, it was some kind of arcade, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Dad's voice sounds strange, nervous maybe. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then said, it was closed. Like everything else in the town, Oswald said. Pretty much, yeah. Dad pulling up the front of the library. Maybe it was Oswald's imagination, but it seems like his dad was relieved to get their destination so he wouldn't have to answer any more of his questions. At 11 o'clock sharp, Oswald headed over to Jeff's Pizza. As he had become his habit, with Jeff nowhere in sight, Oswald proceeded to go to the pit. After his count to 100, he stood. There was noises, but not the usual ones in Freddy Fazbear's. Screams, crying children, yells for help, the fast footballs of people running, chaos. Were Chip and Mike here? Were they here? Was anybody here okay? He was afraid. Part of him wanted to disappear back in the ball pit. But he was worried about his friends. Also, he was burning with curiosity about what was going on. Even if he knew whatever it was horrible. He wasn't in danger, he told himself. Because this was the past, a time way before he was born. His life couldn't be in danger in a time before he even existed, could it? His stomach in knots. He moved through the crowd, past crying mothers running with their toddlers in their arms, past dads grasping children's hands and leading them swiftly towards the exit, their face masked with shock. Chip? Mike? He called, but his friends were nowhere to be seen. Maybe they hadn't come to Freddy Fazbear's today. Maybe they were safe. Scared but feeling if he had known what was happening, Oswald walked in the opposite direction with everyone else, with the escalating feel of dread. In front of them stood a man in the yellow bunny suit, if it was a man under it. The bunny opened the door that says private and went inside. Oswald followed. The corridor was long and dark. The rabbit looked at him with blank eyes and an unchanging grin. Then walked further down the hall. Oswald wasn't chasing the rabbit. He was letting the rabbit lead him, as if he were a terrified version of Alice in Wonderland going down the rabbit hole. The rabbit stopped in front of the door with a sign reading party room and beckoned for Oswald to come inside. Oswald was shaking with terror, and he was too curious to refuse. Besides, he kept thinking, you can't hurt me. I haven't even been born. Once inside the door, it took Oswald a few seconds to register what was actually seeing, and a few seconds more his brain to progress. They were lined up against the wall, which was painted with images of the place's mascots. The grinning bear, blue bunny, and the bird girl. Half a dozen kids, none other than Oswald, their lifeless bodies popped into sitting positions. Their legs stretched out in front of them. Some of them had their eyes closed as if to sleep. Others' eyes were open, frozen and empty, dull like stares. They were all wearing Freddy Fazbear birthday party. Oswald couldn't tell how they died, but he knew the rabbit was responsible for it. That the rabbit had wanted him to see his handwork. Maybe the rabbit wanted Oswald to be his next victim, or to join the others lined up against the wall with their unseen eyes. Oswald screamed. The yellow rabbit lunged for him, and he ran out the room and down the black corridor. Maybe the rabbit could hurt him. Maybe he couldn't. Oswald didn't want to hang around long enough to find out. He ran across the now empty arcade towards the ball pit. Outside, the police sirens. Screams matched Oswald's own. The rabbit ran after him. Getting close to that fuzzy paw brushed Oswald's back. Oswald dove into the pit. He counted to 100 as fast as he could. When he stood, the first thing he heard was Jeff's voice. There's the little stinker. Oswald turned to see his dad stomping towards him when Jeff looked on. Dad looked furious, and Jeff didn't look happy either. Not that he ever did. Oswald stood frozen, too overwhelmed to move. His dad grabbed his arm and pulled him out of the pit. What were you thinking hiding that nasty old thing? Dad said. Didn't you hear me calling you? Oswald was out. His dad leaned over to the pit. Look how dirty it is. Your mother... A pair of yellow arms reached out the pit and pulled Dad under. The struggle would have been cartoonish if it hadn't been so terrifying. Dad's feet in their brown work boots kick up the surface, only to disappear below. Then a pair of big, fuzzy yellow feet appear, only to disappear too. The balls in the pit rolled like a stormy sea, and then they were still. The yellow rabbit rose from the pit, adjusting his purple bow tie, brushed off his front, and turned towards Oswald, grinning. Oswald backed away, but the rabbit was beside him, its arms firmly around Oswald's shoulders, guiding him towards the exit. Oswald looked at Jeff, who stood behind the counter. Maybe Jeff would help him, but Jeff wore the same hangdog expression he always wore and just said, "See you later, guys." How could anyone act like this situation was normal? Once the rabbit got him outside, it opens the passenger seat of Dad's car and pushed Oswald in. Oswald watched as the bunny buckled its seatbelt and started the car. He tried to open the door, but the bunny had activated the power lock from the driver's seat. The bunny's mouth was frozen with a raucous grin. Its eyes stared blankly. Oswald pushed the unlock button again, even though he knew it would work. Wait, Oswald said, can you do any of this? Can you even drive a car? The bunny said nothing, but started the car and pulled into the streets. It stopped at the red light, so Oswald figured it must be able to see and must know the basic rules of driving. What did you do to my dad? Where are you taking me? Oswald could hear the panic in his voice. He wanted to sound strong and brave, like he was standing up for himself, but instead he just sounded scared and confused what he was. The bunny said nothing. The car made a familiar right turn, then a familiar left into Oswald's neighborhood. How do you know where I live? Oswald demanded. Still silent, the bunny turned into a driveway in front of Oswald's ranch-style house. I'll run for it, Oswald said. As soon as the thing unlocks the car, I'll run into the neighbor house and call the police. Once I'm safely inside, the locks click, and Oswald jumped out of the car. Somehow the bunny was staying right in front of him. It grabbed his arm. He tried to break free, but his grip was too strong. The bunny dragged Oswald to the front door, then yanked off the chain around Oswald's neck that held his house key. The rabbit turned the key in the door and shoved Oswald inside. It just stood in the front of the door, blocking the exit. Jinx the cat, wandering in the living room, took one look at the rabbit, arched her back, profiled her tail, and hissed like a cat on a Halloween decoration. Oswald had never seen her act scared or unfriendly before, and he watched as she turned tail and fled down the hall. If Jinx knew the situation was bad, it must be really bad. You can't do this, Oswald said to the rabbit. In tears, he didn't want to cry. He wanted to look strong, but he couldn't help it. This is kidnapping or something. My mom will be home and she'll call the police. It was a total bluff, of course. Mom wouldn't be home until after midnight. He'd be alive by the time Mom get home. Was his dad even alive now? He knew the bunny would grab him if he tried to make a run for the back door. I'm going to my room now, okay? I'm not trying to escape. Just going to my room. He backed away, and the bunny led him. As soon as he got inside the room, he slammed the door and locked it. He took deep breaths and tried to think. There was a window in his room, but it was high and too small to climb out through. Under his bed, Jinx let out a loud growl. Oswald could hear the bunny outside his door. If he made a phone call, it would hear him. But maybe he could send a text. He took out his phone, his shaking hand, texting, "Mom, emergency, something wrong with Dad, come out now." Oswald knew even as he texted, she wouldn't come home now, because she was always dealing with medical emergencies at work. Sometimes it took her a long time to check her phone. It was Dad who Oswald was supposed to contact in the end of emergency. Obviously, that wasn't going to work now. A miserable hour passed until Oswald's phones vibrate. Afraid the rabbit might still be listening outside his locked door, he picked up without saying hello. "Oswald, what's going on?" Mom sounded terrified. "Do I need to call my 911? I can't talk now," Oswald whispered. "I'm on my way home, okay?" She hung up. 15 minutes seems to pass more slowly than Oswald thought was possible. Then there was a knock on Oswald's door. Oswald jumped, his heart. "Who is it?" "It's me," Mom said, sounding exasperated. "Open the door." He opened the door just to make sure it was really her. Once he let her in, he closed and locked the door. "Oswald, you need to tell me what's going on." Mom's brow was furrowed with worry. "Where to start? How do we explain without sending cries? It's Dad. He's not okay. I'm not sure where he is." Mom put her hands on Oswald. "I just saw your dad. He's laying on the bed in our bedroom, watching TV. He made you chicken pot pie for dinner. It's sitting on the stove." "What? I'm not hungry." He tried to wrap his mom around Mom's words. "You saw Dad?" Mom nodded. She was looking at him like he was one of her patients instead of her kids. Like she was trying to figure out what's going on with him. What was wrong with him? "But he's okay?" She nodded again. "He's okay, but I'm worried about you." She put her hand on his forehead. "If he's checking for a fever." "I'm okay," Oswald said. If Dad's okay, I'm okay. He just didn't seem okay. Maybe it's a good school. Maybe it's good. It's good school starting back. I think you're spending too much time by yourself." What could he say? Actually, I've been spending time with my new friends in 1985. Maybe so. I probably should just go on to bed. I have to get on an early start in the morning. "I think that's a good idea," Mom says. She put her hands on his cheek and looked him directly in the eye. "And listen, if you're going to text me at work, make sure it's a real emergency. You scared me." "I thought it was a real emergency. I'm sorry." "It's all right, honey. Go get some rest, okay?" "Okay. Okay." After Mom left, Oswald looked under the bed. Jinx was still there, crouching on a ball like she was trying to make herself as small and visible as possible. Her eyes wide and looked terrified. "It's okay, Jinky," Oswald said, reaching under the bed and wiggling his fingers at her. "Mom said it's safe. You can come out now." The cat wouldn't budge. Oswald lay awake in bed. If Mom had said it was there and okay, then it must be true. Why would she lie? But Oswald knew what he had seen. He had seen the yellow thing, as he had started to think of it, drag his dad into the pit. He had seen the yellow thing climb out of the pit, felt had felt its grasp in his arms, sat beside it in the car as it drove home. Or had he? If Mom and Dad was home and okay, he must be. Oswald trusted his mom, but if his dad was okay, it meant Oswald hadn't seen what he thought he saw, and that must mean that Oswald was losing his mind. After only a few hours of fitful sleep, Oswald woke to the aroma of frying ham and baking biscuits, his stomach rumbling, reminding him he missed dinner last night. Everything felt normal. Maybe he should just treat yesterday as a bad dream and try to move forward. A new school year, a new beginning. He stopped in the bathroom, then made his way to the kitchen. "Feeling better?" Mom said. There she was, her hair in a ponytail, wearing her pink fuzzy bathrobe, fixing breakfast just like always. Something about this fact made Oswald feel tremendously relieved. "Yeah," he said, "I'm pretty hungry, actually." "Now that's a problem I can fix," Mom said. She sat down to plate with 2 ham biscuits and poured him a glass of orange juice. Oswald ate the first ham biscuit in 3 big bites. The yellow thing walked in and sat across him at the biscuit table. Mom?" Oswald's heart beat like a jackhammer in his chest. The ham biscuit sat heavy in his churning stomach. "What is it, honey?" Her back was turned and she felt, "Where's Dad?" She turned around, the coffee pot in her hand. "Oswald, your dad is sitting right across from you. If this is some kind of elaborate prank, you can cut it out right now because it has officially stopped being funny." She poured a cup off the cup and set it down in front of the yellow thing, which stared straight ahead, its mouth set in an unhinged grin. Oswald knew he wasn't getting anywhere. Either he wasn't saying or his mom's was, "Okay, I understand. I'll cut it off. I apologize. Maybe I'd be excused so I can get ready for school." "Of course," Mom said, but she was looking at him kind of funny again. Oswald stopped in the bathroom to brush his teeth and then went to his room to get his backpack. He peeked under his bed to find Jinx still hiding there. "Well, it's good to know there's someone else in the family who has some sense," he said. When Oswald came back into the kitchen, the yellow thing was standing by the door, car key in paw. "Is Dad taking me to school?" Oswald said. He didn't know if he can bear sitting beside in the car again, hoping it was watching the road as it stared through his windshield eyes with empty eyes. "Doesn't he always?" Mom said. He could hear the worry in her voice. "Have good days, okay?" Seeing no choice, Oswald got in the car beside the yellow thing, once again, and locked all the doors from the driver's seat. It backed out the driveway and passed a jogging neighbor, who waved as if it were his dad. "I don't understand," Oswald said, in the edge of tears. "Are you real? This real? Am I going crazy?" The yellow thing said nothing, just stared at the road ahead. When they pulled up the front of Westbrook Middle School, the crossing guards and kids didn't seem to notice the car was being driven by a giant yellow rabbit. "Hey," Oswald said before he got, "don't bother picking me up this afternoon. I'll catch the bus." The school bus, a big yellow thing he could handle, because it was some kind of cosmic law. The first person Oswald said hallway was Dylan, his tormentor. "Well, well, well. If it isn't Oswald the "Aw, give it a rest, Dylan," said, pushing past him. "I got way bigger problems than you today." It is impossible to concentrate in class. Usually Oswald was a pretty decent student, but how could he focus in his life and possibly his sanity falling apart? Maybe he should talk to someone, the school counselor or the school police officer, but he knew anything that came out of his mouth would sound dangerously crazy. How could he convince a police officer that his dad was missing if everyone who looked at the yellow thing saw Oswald's dad? There was no one to help him. Oswald was going to have to figure out how to solve this problem himself. At recess, he sat on the bench in the playground, grateful that he didn't have to pretend to listen to the teacher and could just think. He couldn't imagine how his life can get any weirder. The yellow thing seemed to think it was his father. This was weird enough, but why did everyone else think it was his father too? "Do you mind if I share your bench?" It was a girl Oswald never seen before. She had curly black hair and big brown eyes and was holding a thick book. "Sure, help yourself," Oswald said. The girl sat down at the opposite end of the bench and opened her book. Oswald went back to his confusing thoughts. "Have you gone to this school for a long time?" the girl asked for a few minutes. She didn't look over at Oswald when she talked. She just kept staring at the pages in her book. Oswald wondered if this meant she was shy. "Since kindergarten." Oswald said it, and then, because he couldn't think of a single other thing to say about himself, he said, "What are you reading?" "Greek mythology," she said. "Tales of heroes. Have you read many megaphology?" "No, not really," he said, feeling stupid immediately. After, he didn't want to give the impression he was the kind of guy who never read books. In desperation, he added, "I love to read, though." And then he felt even stupider. "Me too," she said. "I probably read this book 1,000 times. It's like a comfort book for me. I read it when I need to be brave." The word brave struck a chord in Oswald. Brave was what he needed to be, too. "Why's that?" "Well, the Greek heroes are super brave. They always doing battle with some kind of big monster, like a Montagar or the Hydra. It's kind of putting things in perspective, you know? No matter how bad my problems are, at least I don't have to battle with a monster." "Yeah," Oswald said, even though he was trying to figure out how to do a battle with a monster. A yellow, long-eared monster in his own home. He couldn't tell this girl about the yellow thing, though. She would think he was crazy and would be leaving her shared bench with the hurry. "So, you said you read that book when you need to be brave," he said, surprised. He was having his conversation giving the way his mind was racing. For some reason, the girl was easy to talk to. "I mean, it may be none of my business, but I was wondering why you need to be brave." She gave a shy little smile. "First day at a new school. Third day into new town. I don't know anyone yet." "Yes, you do," he said. He held a hand. "I'm Oswald." He didn't know what he was offering his hand like he was some kind of businessman, but it felt like the right thing to do. She took his hand and shook it surprisingly firmly. "I'm Grabiella." Somehow this is a conversation Oswald had needed to have. He took the bus home from school. When he came inside, the yellow thing was vacuuming the living room. He didn't ask any more questions. It wasn't as if it could give him any answers anyway. And besides, if he was going to make his plan work, he was going to have to act like everything was normal. And as anyone who have seen him in the fourth grade class play, he knew, acting was not one of his talents. Instead, he did what he was supposed to do when life was normal. When his real dad was vacuuming the living room, he got a feather duster out of the cleaning closet and dusted the coffee table, the end tables, the lamps. He emptied the wastebasket and kneaded the throw pillows on the couch. Then he went to the kitchen and took out the garbage and the recycling. Once he was outside, it was tempting to run, but he knew running was not the answer. If anyone saw the yellow thing as his dad, nobody would help him. The yellow thing would always catch him. He went back inside. His chores done, he walked right past the yellow thing. "I'm gonna go chill out in a while before dinner," he said, even though the possibility of relaxing in any way was unimaginable. He went to his room, but he didn't close the door. Instead, he took out his shoes, sprawled into bed, and started drawing his sketchbook. He didn't want to draw mechanical animals, but they seemed to be all he could draw. He shut his sketchbook and started reading a manga, or at least pretend to, normal. The plan could only work if he acted like everything was normal. When the right rabbit appeared in the doorway, he managed not to gasp. It became for him the same way when it led him into the murder room of Freddy Fazbear's, and he followed into the kitchen. On the table was one of the grocery store pizza his dad kept in the freezer, baked to a pleasing golden brown, and 2 glasses of fruit punch Oswald liked. The pizza had already been sliced, which was a relief, because Oswald couldn't imagine what he would have been done if he had seen that thing holding a knife, running, screaming out in the street probably. Oswald sat down at the table and helped himself to a slice of pizza. He didn't feel much like eating, but he knew he couldn't act like everything was wrong. He took a bite of the pizza, a sip of punch. "Aren't you going to eat something, Dad?" he asked. It was hard calling the thing Dad, but he managed. The yellow thing sat across of him in silence, and its unblinking stare and frozen grin. The untouched pizza slice on the couch, untouched glass of punch. Could it even eat? Oswald wondered. Did it need to? What was it anyway? At first he thought it was a guy in a suit, but now he wasn't so sure. Some sort of highly sophisticated animatronic animal, or a real flesh and blood giant bunny. He didn't know which possibility was more disturbing. With great effort, he finished the pizza slice and glass and punch and said, "Thanks for the dinner, Dad. I'm going to get a glass of milk and go do my homework now." The yellow thing just sat there. Also, went to the refrigerator. He checked to make sure the yellow thing wasn't watching and poured some milk in a bowl. When he was in his room, he didn't close and lock the door because he wouldn't if he were at home with Dad. Normal, so not to arouse suspicious. He slid the bowl of milk under his bed and where Jinx was, still hiding. "It's going to be okay, girl," he whispered. He hoping he was right. He sat on his bed with a few minutes, heard Jinx lapping the milk. He knew from past experience that even when terrified, she couldn't turn down dairy products. He made a half-hearted attempt at his homework, but he couldn't concentrate. All he could think about was his dad. The yellow thing had dragged his dad into the pit and under the surface. Did this mean his dad was at Freddy Fazbear Serial 1985? Wandering around the arcade of games he had played as a kid? That was the most likely explanation. Unless the yellow thing had killed. No, he wouldn't let himself think that. His dad was alive. He has to be. The only way to know was to go back into the pit. But first he was going to have to get out of the house without the yellow thing noticing. Oswald waited till dark, then waited for some more. Finally, he grabbed his shoes and tied two out of the room and into the hall in his sock feet. The door to his parents' bedroom was open. He sneaked a glance inside as he creeped. The yellow thing was lying in his parents' bed. It appeared to be staring at the ceiling. Or maybe it wasn't staring. Maybe it was asleep. It was hard to tell since his eyes didn't close. Did it even need to sleep? Holding his breath, he passed his parents' room and tiptoed to the kitchen. If the yellow thing had caught him, he could always say that he was just getting a drink of water. The kitchen was the best escape route. The door there was less squeaky than the front door. It slipped into his shoes and pulled the door open slowly, inch by inch. When it was open, just wide enough, he slipped through and shut it softly behind him. Then he ran. He ran through his neighborhood and past neighbors walking their dogs and kids riding bicycles. Some people looked at Oswald strangely, and he couldn't figure out why. People run in the neighborhood all the time, but then he realized he wasn't running like he was doing exercise. He was running like something was chasing him, and it might be. It was a long way to Jeff's Pizza on foot, and Oswald knew he couldn't keep up this pace all the way there. He slowed to a walk after he was out of the neighborhood and chose to walk sidewalks instead of more direct routes where he had heard a fall. He was afraid Jeff's Pizza might be closed by the time he reached it, but when he arrived, hot and out of breath, the lights open sign was still on. Inside, Jeff was at the counter, watching a ball game on TV, but otherwise, the place was empty. You know, we just serve whole pizzas at night, no slices. Jeff said in a usual undertone. As always, he looked exhausted. Yeah, I just stopped by to get a soda to go, Oswald said, his glance roaming the rope-off ball pit. Jeff looked a little puzzled, but finally said, okay, let me get a pie out of an oven, but then I'll get it for you, Orange, all right? Right, thanks. As soon as Jeff disappeared in the kitchen, Oswald ran to the back counter and drove to the pit. The familiar musty smell filled his nose as he sank beneath the surface. He sat on the pit's floor. He counted to 100 as he always did. Even though he wasn't sure it would serve any purpose in getting him to make the jump to Freddy Fazbear in 1985, he shit in the ball pit and felt something solid press against his lower back. A shoe? It felt like a sole of a shoe. He scooted around and grabbed it. It was a boot. A steel-toed workbook like his dad used to wear to work at the mill and now wore to his job at the snacks. He moved his hand up a little. An ankle of this kind of thick a thick boot sock his dad liked. He crawled further across the floor of the pit. His face, he had felt a face, but it was some kind of giant furry head. Like the elves think, he might never stop screaming, but he had to find out. His hand felt his shoulder. He reached to the chest and felt a cheap fabric of white undershirt. He was shaking as he reached higher. He felt an unmistakable human face, skin and stump, a man's face. Was it that? Was he? He had to be alive. He had to be. Oswald has seen shows where people who had been in emergency situations suddenly developed amazing strength and found themselves able to lift to the front end of the car or tractor. This was the kind of strength Oswald needed to find his dad. Wasn't a big man, but he was still a man. He weighed at least twice as much as his son. He had to move his dad if he's going to save him. Even if it is his dad, it wasn't some kind of cruel hoax set up by a yellow thing to trap him. Oswald couldn't let himself think about these thoughts, not only if he was going to do what he had to do. He got behind the person, grabbed under his armpits, and pulled. Nothing happened. Dead weight. Oswald fought. No, not dead. Please, not dead. He pulled again, this time with more force, making a noise that was somewhere between a grunt and a roar. This time the body moved, and Oswald pulled again, standing up and getting the person's head and shoulders above the surface. It was his dad, pale and unconscious, but breathing, definitely breathing around them. Not Freddy Fazbear and Pizza, but the normal present-day weirdness of Jeff's Pizza. How could Oswald get him out? He could call Mom. As a nurse, he would know what to do, but what if she thought she was crazy or lying? He felt like a boy who cried wolf or the boy who cried rabbit. He felt it before he saw it. The presence behind him, the awareness of something that was personal space. Before he could turn around, a pair of furry yellow arms locked around him with a fearsome embrace. He got his to jab his elbow into the yellow thing's midsection. He got loose, but the thing was blocking the exit of the door. He couldn't get out of the pit by himself, let alone with his poor, passed-out dad. Acting more than thinking, Oswald charged the rabbit with his head down. If he could just throw it out of bounds or knock it under the surface, maybe he could make it end up in 1985 Freddy Fazbear and buy Oswald and his dad some time to escape. He headbutted the yellow thing and knocked it into the ropes and netting the surrounding ball pit. It stumbled a bit, right in itself, and then, arms outstretched, lunged towards Oswald. It pushed Oswald against the wall in the pit. Its eyes dead as always. It unhinged its jaw to reveal double rows of fangs and sharp symmetries. Mouth open freaking wide. freakishly wide. It lunged towards Oswald's throat, but he blocked it with his arm. Pain pierced Oswald's forearm as the yellow thing sunk its teeth into his skin. Oswald needed his good arm to punch the rabbit hard in the face before the fangs pierced it too deep. Fangs? What kind of creepy rabbit has fangs? The thing's jaw released its grip, and there was no time to survive the damage because the thing was lurching towards Oswald's dad, its jaw wide open like a snake about to swallow the unsuspected prey. Its fangs were red with Oswald's blood. Oswald elbowed the yellow thing aside and moved it between his still conscious dad. "You leave my dad alone!" he yelled. He then used the netting of the bounce off and chambered on the yellow thing's back. He hit its head with his fist, stretched its eyes like it didn't feel like a living creature's eyes. The rabbit stumbled back in the netting and ropes, then grabbed Oswald's arm and slung him hard on his shoulders and into the pit. Oswald felt head first on the surface, grateful that the bottom of the pit was soft. His arms was throbbing. His whole arm was exhausted, but he had to get up. He had to save his dad. Like those ancient Greek heroes Gabriel had told him about, he had to be brave and face the monster. Oswald rose unsteadily on his feet. Somehow, when it shook Oswald off, the yellow thing must have gotten tangled in the ropes and netting that lined the ball pit. The rope was looped around its neck. It grasped the rope in its big paws, trying to break free. Oswald couldn't understand why it was failing to free itself. Until it saw the yellow thing's feet weren't touching the floor of the ball pit. The yellow thing was suspended from the rope, which was tied securely in the metal rope at the long of the pit. The rabbit had banged itself. Its mouth was open and closing like it was gasping for breath. But no sound came out. Its paws clawed desperately at the ropes. Its stare, still terrifying its blankness, was aiming to Oswald's direction, as if it was asking him for help. Oswald was certainly wasn't going to rescue it. After a few more seconds of struggling, the yellow thing was still. Oswald blinked. Hanging from the ropes was nothing but the dirty, empty yellow rabbit costume. His dad's eyes were open. Oswald rushed to his side. "I don't understand why I'm here," Dad said. His face was pale and unscathed. His eyes puffy with dark half-moon under them. "What happened?" Oswald debated what to say. "You were attacked and left for dead for a giant evil rabbit who tried to replace you, and I was the only person who saw it. It wasn't even you. Even Mom thought it was you." No, it sounded too crazy, and Oswald didn't relish the idea of spending years in therapy saying, "But the evil rabbit was real." Jinx was the only other member of the family who knew the truth, and being a cat, she wasn't going to say anything in his defense. Besides, his dad has already been suffered enough. Oswald knew it was wrong to lie. He also knew that lying was not the skill he had. When he tried, he always get all nervous and sweaty and said, a lot. But this situation, a lie might be the only way forward. He took a deep breath. "So, I hid in the ball pit to play a prank on you, which I shouldn't have done. You came looking for me, and I guess you must have hit your head and lost consciousness." I also took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. This part, at least, was the truth." "I accept your apology, son," Dad said. He didn't sound mad, just tired. "But you're right. You shouldn't have done it. And Jeff really should have get rid of this pulpit before he had a lawsuit in his hands." "Definitely," Oswald said. He knew that he would never set foot in the pit again. He would miss Chip and Mike, but he needed to make some friends in his own time. His mind flashed to a girl on the bench at recess, Gabrielle. She seemed nice, smart too. They had a good talk. Oswald reached for his dad's head. "Let me help you stand up." With Oswald steadying him, Dad rose to his feet and let his son lead him to the exit of the ball pit. He paused to look up the yellow hanging costume. "What is that creepy thing?" "I have no idea," said Oswald. This was, too, the truth. They came out of the ball pit and walked through Jeff's Pizza. Jeff was wiping the counter still, watching the ball game and the restaurant TV. Had he not seen or heard anything? Still holding Oswald's hand when was the last time he and his head held hands? Dad lifted his arm and looked at it. "You're bleeding." "Yeah," Oswald said. "I must have scraped my arm when I was trying to pull you out of the pit." His dad shook his head. "Like I said, that thing is a public safety issue. Just sticking up a sign saying keep out isn't enough." He let go of Oswald's arm. "We'll get your arm cleaned up at the house. Then your mom can dress the wound once she gets home from work." Oswald wondered what his mom would say when she saw the fang marks. As they approached the front door, Oswald said, "Dad, I know I can be a pain sometimes, but I really do love you, you know?" Dad looked at him with an expression that seemed both pleased and surprised. "Same here, kiddo." He ruffled Oswald's hair. "But you do have terrible taste in science fiction movies." "Oh yeah?" Oswald said, smiling. "Well, you have a terrible taste in music, and you like boring ice cream." Together, they opened the door with a fresh night air. Behind them, Jeff said, "Hey kid, you forgot your soda."